God covenanted with a man. The man who's known as the father of the faithful. The man who's called the father of many nations. His name was Abraham. And God's promise to Abraham was that you would follow, you would obey, you would trust. And my covenant to you is I will make from you many nations. And out of that are people who are called by my name. A covenant people. His name, as I said, is Abraham. Abraham has a son, Ishmael, who is born perhaps out of God's divine design for the covenant, but God still blesses Ishmael. And then finally, Isaac is born of Abraham's wife, Sarah, and the covenant flows on to Isaac, his son, to Jacob, and then, of course, to the patriarchs, the most notable being Joseph. Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery, into Egypt. They didn't like the fact that he was getting visions and dreams about how God was going to actually elevate him above all his brothers. And how many know if you've got brothers today, start talking like that, it's not going to be a great career move. And so he does, in fact, he starts saying, well, I'm having dreams and I'm seeing God's call upon my life, elevate me above all of you, my older brothers. They decide, we're going to go ahead and kill this guy. And then their conscience kind of strikes them a little bit and they say, maybe let's make a bit of coin out of him. Let's not kill him, but let's go ahead and sell him off. And he's sold off into slavery by a trader who takes him to Egypt and sells him to a governor in Egypt. His name's Potiphar. And Potiphar employs Joseph as the steward in his house, and Joseph soon rises to the top in the house. But because of the immorality of Potiphar's wife, continually trying to drag Joseph into her bed to commit immorality with, and Joseph resists and fights her off, she gets so infuriated, she screams out, rape, rape, he's trying to attack me, and Joseph's thrown in prison. Long story short, Joseph, because of the gift of God upon his life, is soon elevated through the interpretation of the dreams of Pharaoh to the prime minister's seat in all of Egypt. The greatest superpower the world had known. Up until that point, Joseph takes the reins to rule it. And a great famine begins to occur in all the other parts of the Near East, and people began to pilgrimage all the way to Egypt because Egypt had stored up grain because Joseph, through wise and shrewd stewardship, had caused Egypt to begin to store up all this excess food because the famine was yet to come. And in comes Joseph's family, in comes his older brothers, and Joseph now sitting in the seat of Pharaoh's prime minister, and Joseph now being the ruler of Egypt, discloses his identity to his brothers and brings them all over, the whole family, to dwell in the place of Egypt called Goshen. But several centuries elapse, and soon a Pharaoh rises up who doesn't remember. He doesn't remember Joseph and all the good that he'd done for Egypt, and he sends out an edict to destroy, to kill, to annihilate the children of the Israelites, the firstborn sons. The Israelites were getting populous, they were expanding, they were becoming powerful, and the Egyptian Pharaoh began to cause them to be slaves in indentured servitude to build the great cities of Egypt. God raised up a deliverer. His name was Moses. Moses came and brought great deliverance to Israel, bringing them out of Egypt. A number in the millions brought them out of Egypt into the desert where God came down upon a mount called Sinai and covenanted with them there. You will be my people. I will be your God. Here is the holy, good, and righteous law that you will follow and keep. And if you do, then only good can come to you. But the people were stiff-necked. They were hard of heart. They were rebellious. In other words, they were human. They were human with an unchanged heart, with an unregenerate heart, and they rebelled against Moses. They rebelled against God. The pilgrimage in the desert was a horrible chapter in Israel's history, as every turn and every time they continually rebelled against God and Moses. And God, finally having had enough with his people, said, now I will give the promised land. You will all die here in the wilderness. I'll give the promised land to your children. And the only ones of your generation that will see it are the good spies, the faithful spies, Caleb and Joshua. We move now into the period that's known as the Judges. That old generation died out, were buried in the wilderness. Some of the language in the Bible is pretty graphic. It says that the desert was strewn with their bodies and they all died out. And then God raised up this new generation. They advanced upon Canaan land. They crossed the Jordan River, and in they came, and they subdued and routed the predominance of the nations and the kings and the empires there, and then they took possession of the land. The judges began to sit in seats of power, to judge among the people, to act as prophets, and to be people who would guide the people of Israel. And God had always said, I'm your king. I'm your God. Don't be like those other nations and those empires chasing after having a king and having a ruler over you. Remember that I will be your king and you will be my people. This will be a sign that you are a unique covenant people in all the world. Generations elapse and the people of Israel decide that, you know what, we really do want a king actually. Thing is, we want a king. So they go to the Lord through the prophet Samuel and they plead for a king, and God gives them what they want and calls the man Saul, a treacherous king. Starts out okay, but soon enough his treachery and his sin takes over and he essentially ruins the land of Israel. He divides it, he caused great turmoil, and God took the kingdom from him and gave it to his servant David. And David, of all his victories, made one notable, consequential victory. He subdued the Jebusites and conquered their city and took over the city of Jerusalem and made it the capital of the entire Israelite country, the nation, and expanded the borders. And David came and he went, and his son Solomon rose up, the wisest man in all of history, probably the wealthiest as well, as far as we can tell comparatively. And he stretched the border of Israel so far that they occupied so many nations. They established themselves as a superpower, and he built the temple of God. After he died, two sons, or one son and another ruler came up, and the kingdoms divided between Israel in the north and Judah and Benjamin in the south. And Judah and Benjamin keep Jerusalem, but Israel in the north keeps Samaria as their capital. And in the north, it's just bad king after wicked king, and then another bad king. And God quickly has enough and causes the Assyrians to come in and just destroy them and tear them all away off into exile. The southern kingdom, it doesn't fare so bad, but it's still pretty bad. It goes kind of bad king to wicked king to good king to wicked king to bad king to good king. In fact, the two highlights are Hezekiah and, of course, Josiah, the boy king. Led great reforms, but soon enough, the southern kingdom, just like the north, could not, in fact, obey God as he demanded to be obeyed, and was swept away. Now the conquering military and the superpower of the world wasn't Assyria, it's now Babylon. Babylon came down, took Jerusalem, destroyed it, burnt it with fire, crushed it beneath their feet, dragged all the people away. They were promised to be in exile for 70 years. In fact, it was the prophets who spoke and said, you will be led back, but not all of you, only a remnant. Maybe 500, 600,000 Jews were dragged off into Babylon, and finally the time came. Babylon soon became Persia. Persia took the kingdom, the empire off them without a struggle, without a fight, almost overnight. It became Persia, and great Cyrus the Great, the king, sent out the edict that all the small ethno-linguistic nationalities within the empire should be sent home to their own cities and build their places of worship and pray for Cyrus the Great and the extension of his kingdom. So he sent the Jews home. On the empire's dollar, he sent them home to rebuild Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. The first return was Zerubbabel, who brought home about 48,000 returning Jews. So remember, the great emperor said, whoever wants to go home and no longer remain in Persia, now's your opportunity. And of over 500,000 Jews, 48,000 put their hand up and said, yeah, we'll do that. We'll go ahead and we'll go home. And then Zerubbabel went, and we've looked at this story recently, rebuilt the temple, reestablished parts of the city, and then Ezra came. Ezra came after several decades later. He came with a second returning remnant. Again, a very small number, maybe a few thousand at best, returned with Ezra. We looked last week at the story of Ezra, and particularly what his unique contribution was. And tonight we look at the third return of exiles. His name is Nehemiah, and he is a person who stands as a significant figure in the Persian court. He is someone of note and repute. He's going to serve Artaxerxes, the emperor. He's going to serve him as his cupbearer. This man who was the cupbearer would taste almost everything that was served to the king, to check see if it was poisonous or dangerous or whether it was cooked well or not. That was what Nehemiah's job was, and he is a Jew. Not only is Artaxerxes' cupbearer his most trusted confidant a Jew, but Artaxerxes' mother-in-law is also a Jew. Artaxerxes' father is the great Xerxes, who, after putting his wife Vashti away for disobedience, he married the Jewish girl named Esther. And so the story continues.